Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist. This week I watched La La Land from 2016. Now, everybody knows La La Land, probably. If you're watching this video, you probably do. Not necessarily because you've seen it, but because you know that shenanigans happened at the Oscars around it. I had forgotten that was 2016. God, that was a long time ago. Anyway, so it got a lot of awards buzz. And you know my feelings on the Oscars and awards in general. But both the critics and the, movie-going community at large seemed to enjoy it. I was hopeful. Man, I've buried the lead. Oh man, I don't like this film. I think it is pretty bad. I'm just gonna throw that out there right now because I don't want to dance around it. Is it a bad film? Is it a badly made film? Is any single aspect of it like grossly incompetent? Is it badly produced or directed or written or no. A lot of those things are actually quite good. But this is one of the most depressing films I've watched in a long time, and I don't think it means to be. I don't think it understands its own subtext. And you know me, the author is dead and all that. And say what you will about the writer and director and how this whole thing got made. That's a story that I don't need to hash out in here. But I wanted this film to be good. I want new musicals. I grew up with musicals. I grew up watching a lot of old films and a lot of musicals and, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers and all those sorts and The Music Man and Singing in the Rain and West Side Story. And I don't want that genre to die. And that is going to be the first of several weird tie-ins between my feelings on this film and some of the actual content of the film itself. And the irony is thick in the air. Because this film seems to revere musicals and not understand what's good about a musical. There's lots of reasons I can understand why people would like this and why they would not like it. And I think I have a kind of different perspective. I can totally understand if people just don't like it because they don't like musicals. I think that's a little blanket, but fair enough. If somebody doesn't like jazz at all, it's not a huge element of this film, but it is a notable one. So if people just don't want anything to do with jazz, fine. I think you're wrong, but fine. There's some uncomfortable social tension that is very millennial in its nature. And if you just look at that and go, it's just too cringy, if it's just too if it's too much like being hit in the face with the zeitgeist, yeah, I can get that too. I feel that one a little bit. But for me, this film is so much less than the sum of its parts. And I am actually stunned that that is the case. I don't know a lot about Damien Chazelle. Damien Chazelle is the writer and director on this film. He's a fairly young guy. Apparently he was trying to get this produced a long time ago. And eventually shelved it and made Whiplash. And Whiplash is a film that I have some concerns with, but I generally think is really quite good. And I'll just sort of stop there and say, if you haven't watched Whiplash, watch that instead. It's the much better film. Even though Miles Turner, what's his name? The young main character, fuck that guy. The actor, not the character, the actor. Fuck that guy. But that's neither here nor there. This one's gonna get weird. Sorry, guys. How do I pick this one apart? I've been mulling it over for 10 hours now. Because I don't know how to talk about this film without I don't know how to talk about this film at all. And certainly I don't know how to talk about it without spoiling the whole thing. And frankly, I don't think that spoiling the story or the content is really the biggest issue, but I'm going to spoil the tone and some other things as well, which I think is more meaningful. I may have already kind of spoiled it by virtue of saying I think this is one of the most depressing films I've watched in a long time. So anyway, if you're still here, either bail out because I'm about to spoil it or don't. So plot synopsis in the most loose way, because there's not much plot here. Two down on their luck artists in LA, through a series of coincidences that make no sense, continue running into each other, end up in a relationship that the movie wants me to believe is a good idea, but it definitely isn't. They progress through that relationship over a year. It falls apart relatively quickly, which again, the movie doesn't seem to want to acknowledge that, it might not be a year, actually. It might be more than a year, but it seems like there's some deliberate structuring that suggests that it's a year, but maybe it's an artistic thing. Anyway, the relationship falls apart. They go their separate ways. They both become successful in their careers. They run into each other one last time, and there's a 15-minute reflection at the end of the film where they both imagine the relationship they could have had. And it's fucking depressing. It's that last sequence is, it's so saccharine, and I think it's supposed to be a little bit sad, but mostly sort of charming and lovely, and it's not. It's fucking depressing. If you saw that sequence in a vacuum, then sure, it's cute. But the context of Emma Stone's character going and watching Ryan Gosling's character, and they imagine this life, and he's successful and she's successful and she's married and there with her husband, and they're both imagining a life they could have had, and they both look deeply sad about it. It's like watching two people's lives end. It's the beginning of a new story where both of those people's lives go to hell because they never resolved their issues, their own issues or their issues with each other. And while the entire thing is set up on a relationship that to me reads as a very bad idea, all the way down, the ending for them to go back and neither of them have mentally dealt with it, it shows so much immaturity and lack of progress in their headspaces, and that isn't like the next scene that doesn't exist is not a good one. It's an unpleasant one. It's one where they're both very upset and they're about to make they're either going to just feel bad or some bad decisions are going to be made. Anyway, that's just my feeling on the very end of the film. The whole of the film as a whole and all of the production surrounding it is a whole other problem. Where do I even start with this? The plot is it's ostensibly a character study, but especially when I have things to compare it to, like Singing in the Rain, of which it cribs not a lot of elements, but it's sort of a very loose adaptation. And West Side Story, which it cribs a few things from, but is also a vastly better movie. And even Whiplash, which, despite its problems, is much more compelling and a much better character study. This is still the best thing I can call it as a character study. It wants to be a romantic drama, comedy, musical, and all of those things are thrown out the window by the way that it is produced. I've already mentioned that the story is very thin. I've basically told you all of the relevant details. There are details about how each of them have the struggles with their career and what that does to their relationship, but those things are not really meaningful. The things that happen to them they don't come from individual character agency. They effectively come out of nowhere. It's this sort of like magical thinking that happens in places like Hollywood, where people, like, if I didn't know better, and frankly, if this film had gone darker, I would have thought that both of these people were delusional and that these were their imagined delusions of how their lives went, because these things happen out of nowhere to push conflict from behind, where the movie wants to have a conflict between the characters, and so the writing works backwards to find a conflict that will initiate the fight in the relationship that it wants them to have. And so neither of them get a lot of agency. Neither of them get much of any character development, because that isn't really the relevant thing. The relevant thing is the relevant thing is not the individual characters. The relevant thing is the relationship. And that makes for a very uncompelling relationship to watch. If you have two characters that I don't really care about or find kind of off-putting, I don't care about their relationship, and I sure as shit don't care if there's problems in their relationship. No matter how much you tried to charm me beforehand with these throwback elements to Days Gone By, I am not engaged in this relationship. You haven't convinced me that I should pay attention or care, or that this isn't some synthesized, saccharine, like, writer's dream garbage. This feels like a film student film, but with all of the production values of a AA or AAA film. This one's going to be all over the place. I have no way to structure this video. It's just going to be ranting. I will try and hit all the relevant points, though. So the plot is rough and unconvincing and thin. The characters are not good. I've already hit on this, but the characters they're not doing anything for me. I don't like either of them. I'm not even really rooting for them. There's plenty of characters of all different stripes in all different movies that I can find myself rooting for. Even villains, that I just like, I want to see what you're a compelling character. I want to see what you do next. And neither Stone nor Gosling have that going on. I am like, so the writing is a problem for them. I heard a lot of people talk about how Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling have chemistry on screen, and they do their best. I think both of them are reasonably talented actors, and I think they do their best with what they have here. And on top of that, I do want to immensely congratulate both of them on the effort put in to learn the skills that they needed to do this film. There's no stand-ins here. They actually learned how to dance and sing and play piano, and they're not great at it. Like, they're no Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, but I wouldn't expect them to be either. And I heard some people complain how that was their problem with the film, is that the two of them weren't good enough to, ape the styles of the, 30s and 40s musicals. And I don't think that's true. I think, if anything, the imperfections that they show are more charming and add actually probably more depth than any of the writing does to making these characters believable. Likewise, I would say both of their performances, while middling, the issues with them are almost entirely due to the script and direction. I got every sense that the actors put on the show that was asked of them. And I just don't think that either the writer and director didn't understand what he had written and the emotions that the scenes and actions he shows impart. Either he didn't understand it, or the wool's been pulled over everyone's eyes. Because they're not charming. And they're not unique. I mean, in fact, one of the first things I was thinking about going into the film was like, oh, this character reads like a self-insert, oh, woe is me, I'm a starving actor in Hollywood thing. And through to now, I still don't know if that is tongue-in-cheek or not. I don't know if it's fully possible that the tone is just weird, and both of these characters are supposed to be kind of assholes that you don't like and don't root for. I mean, maybe that's the revelation I'm going to have here and now, is that the best way to watch this film is to believe that they're both villains. Because I can't see how all of these other people have been compelled by this relationship. From the very beginning, the characters are established as immature, problematic, volatile, and prone to questionable decision making. And then they find each other and they are in conflict repeatedly. And somehow that conflict, without any evolution, leads into a relationship that doesn't seem to make sense for either of them, why either of them would want it, other than that they're both sexy struggling artists in LA, which is, who cares? Like that doesn't make a compelling couple. And then the evolution of their relationship goes on in a way that, I mean, there aren't even that many scenes. And that again leads to an underdevelopment of their characters and to an underdevelopment of their relationship, is it goes sort of straight from we're like this now to we're like that now to we're like this now. And it just feels very expository. It's done subtly, but a lot of this film is extremely expository. And then they go their separate ways. They live their lives. They become successful. They develop lives of their own. And then this ending hits, which is not cute. It's painful to watch. It's shot like it's supposed to be some glorious celebration of what could have been, but you just like come out of it go like, if I had been more compelled by the characters, I might have watched that and gone, I might have watched that and been sad that they couldn't develop themselves and reconcile their differences, and that maybe they did belong together. But at no point did I ever think these two belong together. And so I'm left holding the bag at the end going, what was this film? Why'd I watch this? Who's it for? And speaking of who's it for all the production, I find all of the songs in the film to be completely unmemorable, save for two, and it's the two songs that the movie itself is making fun of. It is actively saying, you hate this song. You hate this because you're cultured. And I'm going, no. This is awesome. I love this. This is the best thing in the film. And I'm actually not going to spoil that, because if you still haven't seen that, but you're watching this and you're determined to watch it anyway, which I don't know who the fuck that would be. It's in like the first third of the film. I hope you know which ones I'm talking about. And then there's these, it's a weird mix as a musical, because I don't have time to sit here for hours and talk about the different musical structures and the evolution of the musical from stage to, from opera and operetta to stage musicals to film musicals, and then the evolution over the last 100 years. It's a fascinating topic, but I don't want to unpack it right now. But this does not fit into any of the forms of a typical film musical. And I think that's deliberate, and I think it's a mistake. I will delve just for a second into descriptions of musicals and mention that how there are sing-through musicals that are basically operas in modern form, where it's basically singing all the way through, perhaps with a few intermissions. And then there's ones that are, this distinction has more to do with the stage versions than the screen versions. The screen versions do tend more towards the latter, the second, which is a fairly normal movie interspersed with musical elements, often because the content also is musically related. Take The Music Man, for example. or West Side Story, where these are sort of naturally musical in their settings, but there's substantial amounts of in-between content that's sort of what drives the plot along. And then the music is both performative as an art unto itself, as well as it serves to sort of measure the pacing of the story as it goes through, allow for some breathing room, and there's usually some level of exposition. All of the songs in this film are bad, and they just hammer exposition into your head. Like, okay, they're not bad. They're fine. But they're completely unmemorable to me. I could not hum you a bar of any song that was composed for this film. There are some that are performances of existing songs, and those I could probably do, but none of the original songs stick out to me. And that's a problem for a musical, because I can sing you every song in The Music Man, and I know which order they go in. And I can't even remember. I can't even remember like the first couple of notes of any of the songs in this one. It's unbelievable how poorly it does at that. And your mileage may vary. But I was so distracted by just these musical compositions of questionable quality, lyrics that are ham-fisted at best and written by 6-year-olds at worst. And I just, nothing about the musicality of this tells me that it's a musical. I don't believe it. It's trying to tell me it's a musical, and I don't believe the film. Like, that's the best way I can describe it. It's doing musical numbers, and I tune out because I got the message already, and you're hammering home narrative elements that already existed in the filmic parts that preceded the song. They're just not integrated at all. And so they don't matter. Ultimately, they kind of don't matter. So I already congratulated Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling on their performances because they do a lot of work in this film. And I have to say, not only did they learn to do the things that they did, but there are some long shots in this film. Long, minutes long. I've talked about oneers before. And these oneers do nothing for me. It feels like a prestige choice. And it feels abusive. It feels abusive to the actors because I am sure that their performances not only could have been better, but that they could have practiced a lot less if the director had not said, hey, you're about to do a 6-minute song and dance number with complex choreography while we swing the camera around. And we're going to keep doing it over and over again. And while that is an element that is common in musicals, film musicals from the 30s, 40s, 50s, even into the 60s, the 60s is sort of where you get more of the West Side Story kind of thing, where it's less stage. it's less of a stage musical and it becomes more intertwined with the language of cinema. It's less filming a stage. But those earlier musicals often did that, and they were great. Of course, I'm going to come back to Singing in the Rain. But that's because those performers were they were dancers first. They were dancers and singers first, and then they ended up performing on stages, and then they went to cinema. And so they already had all the skills. They were already used to rehearsing over and over, and they were used to putting on a show that they only have one take of, because if you screw it up, the audience is live. And that is very different from film. And I'm not saying that that's a whole other discussion I could have. I say that all the time because I really could, about the differences and similarities between stage and screen over the years. But when you have the opportunity to use cinematic language to further your storytelling and the production value, while also lessening the burden on the cast and crew, it feels masturbatory to do a long oneer with these people. And I have worse news. It gets worse. It's not even shot that well. So let's talk about Cinemascope. Cinemascope is I haven't talked about cameras and film stock in a while. I don't think I've talked about it since, what was it? Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, I think. Cinemascope. It is a lens. It was a lens and camera system, lens, camera, and film system, anamorphic film or anamorphic lens system, created and very commonly used throughout the 50s musicals and other productions as well, to have a wide format color film stock and color film and camera system to take advantage of these large stages, basically these large spaces in which a lot of musicals were performed for cinema. My understanding is that real Cinemascope doesn't exist anymore. Like, as with many of these technologies, they get thrown away and then they're never resurrected. But they do their best to recreate it. And it doesn't do the film any favors. Some people have commented that they think this film is really pretty, and I do not. There are some moments that I think are nice, but it's not due to the directorship or the cinema. It's not due to the cinematography. It's not due to the film or the aspect ratio. It's this, once again, similar to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, feels like, and the old man with the gun, is that the one? It feels again like somebody working with a camera they don't understand. And they do these close-ups with just the wrong lens on these anamorphic lenses, these long anamorphic lenses that I think have been cropped. And you do these close-ups and it's like, you can't do that with this lens because their faces are squished. And then it cuts to the wide shots and these recreation, this nostalgia for this bygone technology uses modern film production standards to record with an old technology, fails to recognize some of the necessities of working with this old technology, like the sheer amount of light they would flood those old stages with. I mean, those actors would just bake in their outfits. And the way those things are typically shot. And so if the Cinemascope attachment and attempt, that like the very first thing in the whole film is the Cinemascope logo for some reason. And so this weird nostalgic attachment to that particular film system, then applied to film these moody, largely dark spaces and weird film compositions where the framing just looks like, hey man, you could have chopped a lot of this film off the edges. You're really not using this frame. It just feels amateurish. It feels like somebody got their hands on like a parent's or grandparent's hardware and they're using it. And that's not to say that there aren't some good attempts at cinematography here. And that's not to say that there aren't some good compositions, and fun use of color, and even like some old stuff like rear projection and matte painting and, splicing in with, I'm sure, using a combination of old techniques and new digital techniques and all these other things that I think are, I could keep rambling, but what I'm trying to say is none of it wowed me. I watched it and at no point was I like, yeah, it's all coming together. This is what this was for. At best, it is visually fine. Maybe kind of pretty, but not wowing. Not wowing. If they wanted to be nostalgic, if they wanted to make an older style of musical, they should have gone with an older style of musical. They shouldn't have had this mishmash of new styles and old styles that don't synthesize well together. And weirdly, that is what ties in to this, well, at least one of the aspects of the story, which is this conflict of Ryan Gosling's character. There's no way around it. This white male who idealizes old jazz and the purity of old jazz and seems to have a not very deep understanding of jazz, even though the character, we're being told by the film that this character supposedly is like a jazz lover and a jazz purist and an incredible performer. And yet, as somebody who does like jazz, I don't think this guy understands jazz. And that's not even to say there is an understanding to have of jazz. I just think his understanding is wrong. Like, if jazz is anything, it is moving. It is not about staying in one place and idealizing the purity of a form. That's like not jazz in every way. And again, I don't know if that's ironic or not. I don't know if the writer doesn't understand that, and whether are we supposed to read this evolution of Gosling's character into this guy who's like okay with performing music he doesn't love, are we supposed to understand that as him selling out? Because that's what the the camera and the writing seem to tell us is that he's kind of an asshole, because first he's an asshole because he's a purist, then he's an asshole because he sells out. But then the framing seems to tell us that we're supposed to like him, which I don't get, because he's mostly unlikable throughout the entire run. And then I don't know if it's supposed to be, if we are supposed to read it as him selling out, then what are we supposed to interpret about his original view that the purity of this old jazz form is important? Are we supposed to read it as earnest, as an earnest belief by the writer that there is some great value in the sanctity of, you know, the pre-war jazz, basically, or, well, not just pre-war, but, you know, like this older non-evolving style that ran through, you know, the 50s and 60s. Are we supposed to read that as earnest, or are we supposed to read it in retrospect as a joke that the guy was a dick all along and he was wrong to believe that jazz is that way? In which case it undermines its own message, because then it's saying that him selling out is not him selling out, which therefore makes Emma Stone an asshole, because it's just, I can't possibly dig into all of the contradictions and weird inconsistencies and confusion about authorial intent that's going on in here. And ultimately, I have to let go of it, because it has to be meaningless. I have to let it wash over me, because otherwise it's just going to frustrate me. I want to like this film. I want to see a revival of musicals. I don't want musicals to be the thing that Disney makes for children. I do not want musicals to die, and I don't want don't get me started on modern stage musicals and the ups and downs therein and what ends up on Broadway and doesn't. I don't want the musical form to die, and I want it to evolve, but this movie is stuck in a weird limbo between idolizing the old forms of musicals and romance films and comedies, and new ones where it's trying to have a more modern and egalitarian and evolutionary view of the art form and all these other things. And just everything about this does not add up to a good film. If you know that phrase of like, if you look at it and squint, obviously you can't really do that for an entire film. But if you look at this film and squint, if you'll accept the metaphor, if you look at this film and squint, it's a well-produced, admirable attempt at reviving an older style of cinematic musical. And if you stop squinting and then you stare at it a little harder and then you dig under the surface, it feels like somebody who loves musicals but doesn't understand what they're about, or why they're good, or why they're compelling, or why writing characters and relationships and conflict in relationships can be so compelling. It doesn't understand any of that. Thank you for making it this far in the video. If you're still here, sorry. This one's real rambly. I'm sure I could spend more time talking about it, but I am sitting alone talking to myself for 45 minutes about a film I've already spent 10 hours thinking about. Well, not straight, but so I think I need to close this out. I don't think this is very good. I don't think it deserves the accolades that it gets. I think it's problematic in a whole lot of ways. And it's just not very entertaining. I think there's a certain mood I could be in, a certain depressed, weird mood, where this would be a great film, where all of the things wrong with this film would like hit me in just the right way, like when you've got like a kink in your back and you just like stretch the right way and you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't have stretched like that, but it fixed my back. It's that kind of thing where this is production wise an 8 out of 10, and in reality it's like a 4. And you know how I feel about giving numerical values for films. Anyway, whether you agree with me or deeply, deeply disagree with me, please leave a respectful comment letting me know what I'm not getting or what you think I'm not getting. Because I'm just not understanding what it is that people like so much or how they're missing so much. Or maybe I'm just a cynical old man. Anyway, thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I've been the Social Solipsist, and I'll see you guys next time.